Hello and welcome to another live event from Slooh, the Community Observatory. I'm Paul Cox, and tonight we have a fascinating, albeit short show where we are going to be tracking the newly discovered near-Earth asteroid 2014 DX110. You're used to it. If you've been watching Slooh shows, you're used to these names that they give asteroids. But anyway, earlier this week, we were planning a big show for another near-Earth asteroid, 2014 CU13, which is making a close approach on Sunday. And suddenly we were looking at our screens and we see DX110 popped up on the alert screen. So we decided to show you this one tonight as a little bit of a taster for next week. Do excuse my grandfather clock, I've got to switch it off. But then, even as we were preparing for tonight's show this afternoon, another asteroid. My producer emails me saying, Paul, there's another asteroid discovered last night and it's just been announced. And, you know, this one is going to be a fairly small one. It's about, I think it was 20 to 46 feet. That's somewhere in the region of 12 meters in diameter. And that's going to be passing Earth by the incredibly narrow distance of 37,000 miles. Now, bear in mind, the one that we're watching tonight is going to be about 215,000 miles. And so we were thinking that one's close. So the one tomorrow night is even closer. Now, like that other one that I mentioned, actually, the other one that's been discovered is going to make its closest approach tomorrow night. But back to tonight's space rock, 2014 DX110. This one is the kind of object that we love because it tells our story, and you can see the images of it on your screen. We're going to be feeding in graphics and images and live images from the observatory for you to watch this asteroid. As you know, they're difficult to spot, so we've highlighted it in this image for you. You can see it's a couple of little lines going over the background stars. Anyway, this particular one was discovered only last Friday, and it was announced by what's called an MPEC, which is a Minor Planet Electronics Circular. You know, most professional techie organizations love to use these kind of acronyms and stuff. But anyway, it's from the Minor Planet Center. And it's the Minor Planet Center who pull in all of the observations that people make of these objects. And we're seeing now, this is a member's image of DX110 taken by one of the Slooh members. And it's a tiny, tiny little dot moving against these background stars. But what our Slooh members did was they measure its precise location in relationship to all of those background stars, and they make a submission to the Minor Planet Center to help make a better orbit, a more accurate orbit, so we know where these things are. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later, about how easily these asteroids get lost. Anyway, back to this particular space rock, DX110. It was discovered last Friday, announced by the Minor Planet Center on Sunday. Slooh members started tracking it on Monday night. And this was discovered by one of the really big professional surveys. They use enormous telescopes. They use fantastic cameras, gigabit cameras with gazillions of pixels. So they image virtually the whole sky every week. And this particular one was discovered by PAN-STARRS. There's another acronym for you: Panoramic Survey Telescope and Rapid Response System. And that's developed, I think that's the University of Hawaii's who does that particular one with a whole bunch of partners. Tonight's asteroid is close, but as you've heard, tomorrow night there's an even closer one. And the asteroid that we're looking at tonight, here it is. This is how fast it's moving. Because it's so close to Earth, its apparent speed across the sky is incredibly fast. And this first graphic shows you just how far across the night sky this asteroid is moving in just 2 hours. So you can see why it's so difficult always to image these asteroids. Now, the next graphic we've got for you actually shows you how far this asteroid is moving through the Slooh images, through the field of view of those high-power telescopes that we use in just the course of this show. So incredibly difficult to track, and we'll keep feeding in some live images, and keep your eyes open. You'll see the stars in the background. You'll see the little faint white line. That's the asteroid DX110 as it makes its closest approach to Earth. Now, what else have we got? Now, this one, people often ask us, can I see this myself? This one is too faint to spot with naked eyes or even binoculars. So you're going to need, for this kind of faint asteroid, you're going to need a large telescope on a very, very good mount that can track really fast objects across the sky. And frankly, you're probably going to need an astronomical CCD camera, which are these specialist, ultra-cooled astronomical cameras that we use for these long exposures to take the images that you're seeing tonight. Now, actually, before we get further into tonight's show, I just wanted to remind you that you have to join us for our special show on Sunday. And that's the show that we were actually planning for tonight, until this little one came up on the alert screens. Now, if I get my timings right, on this Sunday at 7 p.m. PDT, 10 p.m. EDT, which is 0200 UTC for the rest of us in the world. And on that show, we have got a very special guest from the Minor Planet Center, Dr. Jose Luis Galash, and we're going to be explaining to you how you can get involved with tracking and monitoring these objects, either using your own telescope if you've got one, or using Slooh's robotic telescopes. It's going to be a fascinating and informative show, and we are going to follow the other asteroid that we're tracking at the weekend, CU13, from its initial discovery through Slooh members and everybody else making submissions of that asteroid, all the way through to it making its closest approach on Sunday night. So that's going to be a fascinating one. By the way, if you enjoy watching that kind of stuff, there's a new series of Cosmos, which is airing, I think, in the USA on Sunday night. So that can be a really astronomical night for you all. Now, when we do these shows, one of the things I wanted to tackle in this show is we quite often see comments. Lots of the news websites and the newspapers pick up these stories of these near-Earth asteroids. And we're always really quite careful how we try and present them. This object is coming very close. Tomorrow's object is coming even closer, 37,000 miles away from Earth. They're not going to impact Earth. But quite often we see these comments on websites that say that we're scaremongering or crying wolf or being sensationalist. But if we look over the last year, we've actually seen examples that aren't just close approaches. Over the last year, our last event, we covered the near-Earth asteroid 2000 EM26, and that was the one that was nicknamed Moby Dick. That, if you remember, discovered in 2000, and it was lost. But this time last year, that show was actually kind of remembering, not celebrating, but kind of remembering the asteroid that exploded in the skies over Russia last February. And if you remember, that one injured 1,000 people. and damaged so much property. And that's really the first time that any people have been injured through an asteroid impacting Earth. So are we crying wolf? Are we scaremongering? Are we sensationalists? Well, on Sunday, we are going to be telling you about another asteroid impact that was filmed as it impacted the moon. And this was actually the second asteroid that was filmed last year impacting the moon. This particular one that you're seeing on your screens now, it was actually filmed last September, but only published over the last couple of weeks. So here we see this is not making a close path to the Earth or to the moon. This actually impacted. This flash is the explosion on the moon's surface as this asteroid plummeted into its surface. Now, are we scaremongering there? I can hear people now, those informed people out there are going to be saying, well, hold on a second, the moon doesn't have an atmosphere like the Earth, so smaller asteroids, they don't burn up before they impact. And that's what we saw in the Russian event. Earth's atmosphere protected us from that asteroid. It didn't make it through to hit the ground, but the shock wave certainly did. So there are those well-informed people saying, well, the moon, Paul, that doesn't have an atmosphere, asteroid's obviously going to get that. And that's true. But on Sunday's show, we're also going to show you the other recently discovered impact. And this time, it was to a planet with an atmosphere. And that planet is Mars. Now, the image we're going to show you, this was taken in, when was it? This is the 19th of November last year. So there we are looking at a NASA image. It's actually from NASA's Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. So this spacecraft is orbiting Mars, taking these incredibly high-resolution images. I think the resolution of their camera, they can see objects down to, I think it's about a foot. Don't quote me on that one, but I think it's about a foot. So they go over this part of Mars, and there you see it, this crater. And that crater is about 100 feet, that's 30 meters in diameter. And they looked back, some bright spark looked back at the previous images of that particular area, and they actually spotted that that crater wasn't there in 2009. So at some point between July 2010, May 2012, an asteroid made it through Mars's atmosphere and impacted the planet. And that's direct evidence that that asteroid made it through Mars's atmosphere. Now, maybe it's just as well we haven't discovered any life on Mars yet, because something tells me after an event like that, they're going to be suffering from a little bit of a headache. But we are going to be talking about more about those two instances on Sunday with the Minor Planet Center astronomer. Now, we're doing our best to keep this whole subject in the news. So it's not us scaremongering. This is us highlighting what a tremendously serious threat these objects pose to Earth. And that's what we're trying to do. And here we see this one tonight, 2014 DX110, right, as it makes its closest approach. It actually made its closest approach 12 minutes ago. Now, we have been trying to raise this story over the last few years at Slooh. And we've just been invited back, actually, to NASA later this month. We went to NASA last year as well. We were invited to participate in a workshop there. And we're going back. We've been invited to go back later this month as part of the NASA Asteroid Grand Challenge. And the reason why we're there is because we're keeping this in the news. We have to keep in the news so that people don't lose interest, so newspapers don't lose interest, so politicians don't lose interest, so the necessary resources can be put into discovering and tracking these objects, because that's the important, that's where Slooh comes in. We want to enlist the countless amateur astronomers around the world with great telescopes, but they don't have a purpose to use them. And anybody else interested can use the Slooh telescopes to help monitor and characterize these asteroids once they've been discovered. Now, these, at the beginning of the show, I mentioned these two organizations, Pan-STARRS and the Catalina Sky Survey, these big surveys, and they're the ones with the big telescopes who can discover these things. But just as we saw last month with Moby Dick, the asteroid nicknamed Moby Dick, unless people make follow-up observations of these newly discovered asteroids, they get lost. So all of that effort those guys put into it disappear. Anyway, back to tonight's near-Earth asteroid. Here's an interesting thing. This is discovered last Friday, but this isn't the first time this particular asteroid has made a close approach to Earth. And this is why it's so obvious that we're not sensationalizing this. This particular asteroid has already made several close approaches to Earth before it was discovered. And you know, I think it was in, when was it? Look at my notes. March 17th, 1988. It passed twice as close as it is tonight. So it went unseen. Even though it was passing closer to Earth than it is tonight, it went unseen, even with these big all-sky surveys searching for these near-Earth asteroids. So there we go. We're not even aware of a lot of these objects that are making their closest approaches. And actually, there was one other example I wanted to tell you about tonight. Did you know, listeners, that the very first asteroid discovered in 2014, it was actually named 2014 AA. Did it make a close approach to Earth? No, it didn't. It impacted Earth. It actually impacted Earth above the Atlantic Ocean, and for some reason it didn't hit the news stories. Why not? Probably because everybody had New Year's Day hangovers, probably. But there was an asteroid which really highlights what we're trying to do here at Slooh. It was discovered very shortly before New Year. No follow-up observations were made of it, so we didn't even track it. We didn't pin down its orbit close enough to understand that it was actually going to impact Earth. We were lucky on that one, but we don't have to fall back on luck with this stuff, all right? We've got to enlist this army of you lot. It's you lot out there. It's not the scientists. It's not the astronomers in NASA. They can find these things, but we need to monitor and track them. So do join us at Slooh for that. But anyway, the other thing that I wanted to point out about this particular asteroid tonight that we're watching, DX110, is that it's so close to Earth tonight that it actually falls within what's called the Hill sphere. And that's a region around the Earth where the Earth's gravity can actually affect the orbit of an object that passes through that zone. So on each one of these passes I've told you about, in 1998, in 1982 as well, it made a pass. We didn't see it then, but its orbit was affected. And that's why we need more observations of these objects, because they get perturbed by the planets. So we need more observations. More observations equal accurate orbits for these objects. So we not only know where they are tonight, but we'll know where they are tomorrow night and next year and 10 years after. So anyway, we've got all of that coming up. So tonight, this has been the asteroid 2014 DX110. Tomorrow night, don't forget, I've told you already that an asteroid was published this afternoon. It hit the alert screens, and that's going to make a close pass tomorrow, 37,000 miles away from Earth. That is less than a stone's throw in astronomic terms. Now, it's small, it's not going to hit Earth, so don't worry about that, but it just goes to show these things come out of absolutely nowhere. So that's just about wraps it up for tonight's show. Please make sure you come back on Sunday for our show when we are going to be watching more live images of asteroids as they whiz past the Earth. And don't forget, we'll have our special guest from the Minor Planet Center, and we'll explain exactly how you can get involved in tracking these near-Earth asteroids with either your own telescope or using Slooh's robotic telescopes. And don't forget, we always like to remind you of this at the end of our shows. Not all Slooh members use the telescopes to monitor these faint little lines. Many of the Slooh members simply enjoy the community and controlling the telescopes to create beautiful color astro images of celestial objects. And I'll tell you, some of the images that you see coming out of the Slooh telescopes are superb. We'll show you some of those on Sunday as well. A big thank you to everybody behind the scenes to put on our live free show tonight. I'm Paul Cox, and this has been a Slooh Community Observatory production. We'll see you on Sunday. Make sure you don't miss it. It is going to be a superb show. So see us on Sunday. Good night, everyone. Hello and welcome to another live event from Slooh, the Community Observatory. I'm Paul Cox, and tonight we have a fascinating, albeit short show where we are going to be tracking the newly discovered near-Earth asteroid 2014 DX110. You're used to it. If you've been watching Slooh shows, you're used to these names that they give asteroids. But anyway, earlier this week, we were planning a show, a big show, for another near-Earth. Asteroid 2014 CU13, which is making a close approach on Sunday. And suddenly we were looking at our screens and we see DX110 popped up on the alert screen. So we decided to show you this one tonight as a little bit of a taster for next week. Do excuse my grandfather clock, I've got to switch it off. But then, even as we were preparing for tonight's show this afternoon, another asteroid, my producer emails me saying,